All right. Hello, everybody. We have an exciting panel here for you today. My name's Dani Tran. I recently joined the BITKRAFT team on the equity team as a principal. I'm joined here today by Mark van Ryswyk and Xiang Shen. And we will have 5 minutes at the end here for questions. But before we get into the meat of the discussion, I want to invite Mark and Xiang to give their own personal introductions here.
Awesome, thank you. And thanks for having me. Mark van Ryswyk, I was most recently Chief Product Officer at Tinder, and then prior to that I was at Glue Mobile and part of the team that ultimately led a $2.4 billion acquisition to Electronic Arts, and then prior to that I was EA Mobile COO. I like to think of myself through the lens of just being really passionate about consumer problems and consumer technology, and so I've taken a lot of those experiences and I'm working on a stealth startup right now.
All right. So I'm Xiang. I'm CTO of Century Games. Before Century Games, I used to work for a lot of large game publishers like EA, Ubisoft, Tencent, Roblox, and then I started my own company, which got acquired by Century Games. Now I'm a CTO of the company.
Amazing, amazing. So, Mark, just to start with you, you've had a very unique experience working in both games and traditional consumer apps. What advice would you give to founders in bringing in game mechanics into their applications? And what do you feel like works from an engagement loop standpoint, from a monetization loop standpoint? And we'd love to hear any stories that you have as well.
For sure. I think one of my biggest moments of learning was when I stepped in as GM of CrowdStar. And at that point, that studio was doing about 48 million of revenue. They had a single product in market, and they were incubating a title called Design Home. And what was interesting stepping into that studio was that there was inherently a very clear mix of convictions around, are we building an app or are we building a game? And then I would attend panels like this, and I'd hear that from other developers like, oh, I don't know if you're building a game. It seems like what you guys have is more of an app. And what I inherently realized in that question is that we needed to answer that. We couldn't build a roadmap without really understanding our identity. And so we put it in the hands of consumers. And we asked consumers, what are we? Are we a game? Are we an app? Are we a social platform? And consumers were so comfortable. It was focus group after focus group, and we did them both in LA and in the Midwest. They put us right in the middle. And they said, well, you're both. You're an app for me. I'm discovering new products, discovering trends. I'm learning about my own taste and style preferences. But you're also a game. You're my creative outlet. You know, it's my opportunity to connect with meeting new people that have like-minded interests. And ultimately, you know, I get rewarded with, you know, these micro rewards by participating in this product. And so often it's our own biases that get in the way of thinking like we need to categorize things. We need to have a structure around what we're building. But what I learned through that experience is consumers don't necessarily think that way. They, you know, they very much just see, does the experience meet their needs? Does it serve them in the use cases and the, you know, opportunities for ultimately delight and engagement? And that can take a lot of different forms. You know, you flash forward to my experience at Tinder. It was interesting stepping into an organization, you know, that was a little bit concerned about it. You know, someone that came from games into the dating space. And you know, the first question I was often asked in a town hall was like, you know, is the goal here to make Tinder a game? And at the heart of any app, you have to be ultra conscious about the user problems that you're intending to solve and focus on solving those really well. And for Tinder, it is ultimately about finding that companion, finding that plus one. And the vulnerabilities of creating a profile and putting yourself out there, you know, knowing that you're getting swiped on and people are making choices about you and how you've, you know, created your persona, and then ultimately the anxiety of a conversation, you can't lose sight of that emotional depth in that experience and how that actually shapes you as a person going through that interaction. And so when you think about game mechanics, you have to think about it in the context of what's relevant to this audience and the psychological state that they're in. And so in CrowdStar, it was fairly easy in thinking about this delight moment married with, you know, discovery. You know, at Tinder, it was really about like, how do we make sure that every session someone feels successful, like they've learned something about themselves, you know, because not every session was going to lead to a match. And so we thought about game mechanics really through the psychology of the experience that we were delivering.
Yeah, and speaking of just like finding the right audience, Xiang, you have built for a number of different platforms within games. You've built for mobile with the success of Whiteout Survival, but you've also built successful Roblox titles such as Lifetopia. And so, can you walk us actually through the product and technical validation for building for these two different platforms? And how should founders think about having a core game and also being able to experiment with new titles and new platforms?
Yeah, in general, I would say data talks. So if I say we're pretty ad hoc, probably not satisfying most of the audience here, but in general, internally we have a process. We never name it, but I came up with a name. We call that TEF, test everything and fail fast. Ultimately, it's data driven, right? So you started testing, like let me just use mobile game as an example because we are doing pretty well over there. We initially test the concept of the game. So before the game even start development, we got some kind of concept testing the CPI, testing the audience, see if actually this is the right market we're thinking about, or the CPI is too high. If it's too high, it's probably not really a big addressable market, then we probably will give up in very early stage. And once we kind of validated the market and we started to develop the game prototype, and then we start testing the early game prototype. And even before the game has been playable, even like the game is barely playable sometimes, we start record the gameplay video and we start testing this gameplay video because sometimes the gameplay could work quite different from the early concept. So, and then we test in the market and we see if everything's still as originally like we thought about. And then we start test early retention, right? Like day 2 retention. And then after that, like if it's also validated, then we start test day 7 retention. And then monetization. And then like one month monetization. Then we start test ROI because most of our mobile game strategy are performance marketing. So we wanted to make sure like we have a good ROI model for each of the game we test. Basically, all these steps contribute to a potential successful game. And we kill like 9 out of 10 game we develop at the time. So probably like the kill rate will be way higher than Supercell, which they are very famous of. And for Roblox, very similar strategy because Roblox even in the extreme side because Roblox is all about discovery. So all the discovery was driven by the platform search and discovery algorithm. So you literally just spend some time, develop the prototype of the game, and you just release that. I mean, sometimes the boundary between a prototype and a real game in Roblox on this platform is pretty blurred. So you grow a garden literally took like a man was maybe just 2 weeks to develop the game, the full game. So on Roblox, it's much faster process, and you taste it. And most of the algorithm were focused on they call it QPTR, qualified play-through rate, and also retention. So you can quickly understand if this is a market fit or not. And Roblox is even easier because once it's a market fit, it will just give you tons of organic traffic, and then you can take off. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mark, you're now building. You're building in stealth. You're back on the founder roller coaster. How has your approach to finding product market fit changed? And what do you think? What core principles have really stayed the same?
Yeah, what I'd say has stayed the same is I've rarely built or led product that was for me. If I think about Tinder, it's an amazing experience, but that was really for a generation much younger than me. So I had to look through the lens of, really my daughter at the end of the day. And when I think about, CrowdStar products, Design Home, Covet, or, Kim Kardashian was in my remit. These were not consumers that were a reflection of like my own personal experiences. And so I've always had to immerse myself and really be empathetic to what that consumer is looking for, what they're experiencing, and then, of course, in an app, what is their pain point? And in this particular category that we're working in right now, it's probably much more akin to something that I'm quite passionate about. But what I've learned very quickly is that what my problem is not the problem that we're hearing from the users that we're talking to. And so that's already been a pivot, because what I've learned about my problem is that as a new nascent product, we don't have the brand recognition, we won't have the trust coming out the gate to solve my problem. Consumers will not believe that we can realistically solve that. But what we did learn was a ton of nuanced insights that we have discovered truths in the category that we can solve for those problems that arguably the incumbents probably won't touch. I think about Tinder, and we created a rubric with all the user problems and essentially scaled those problems in terms of what would have the largest percentage population to the smallest. And sometimes we would take the small ones because it was either an easy win or it was frankly the right thing to do because it was the experience was broken for a consumer group. But there were many problems in that bottom tranche that we were never going to tackle because we were talking about a fraction of a decimal point. And so that's, for me as a startup, I lean into the fraction of the decimal point because I know the incumbents don't have the time or the cycles to spend focused on those problems. And so we have now a set of hypotheses that we're applying. And the challenge I always found with MVPs was how do you compete with an incumbent? How do you wrestle through that decision of, hey, I'm launching a game, but all the products out there have a social system. Can we really launch without a social system? Are we going to get the right signal from that? And so the way that we're approaching this product is that we've essentially modularized the product, and it has a marketplace component to it. So we're going to release the product as modules, and the consumers will eventually meet in the middle, but we will form mastery around each one of these modules. That a team of 8, we've got to do one at a time, but we're launching our first module this year, and what we're going to learn, we're not going to focus on big beats like what does day one retention look like. We're going to look for nuanced signals of did we get X number of exchanges in terms of an interaction, and so we're looking for signals of like did we get the top of funnel right, and then the next module is going to focus on the other side of the marketplace. And it's going to be much more for us thinking about the content wheel and how do we kick up that content creation aspect. And as we form mastery around that, we'll start building the components on each one of these products, and then eventually the market will come to see the product that we've built.
Mm-hmm. Xiang, how do you think about resource allocation between proven revenue streams and new experimental opportunities? And what is the importance of having a core set of infrastructure to be able to build and scale new products like Kingshot? And for the founders in the audience, like what do you think it takes to build the next Century Games?
Yeah, so to answer your first question, we typically allocate more than half of our resourcing developing new concept, exploring new genre. One of the philosophy we have is if the genre is too niche, then we are not touching that. So as long as other than Forex strategy, we're also working on casual game, which is a huge market, right? So and also Roblox, we believe is a huge market. That's why we are working on that. So as long as we know this genre is big enough, then we'll put resource over there until we understand that. And throughout this process, then I would say the technology and knowledge communication is extremely important. Like Kingshot is a very good example. It basically built upon the established knowledge and established framework and established marketing practices of Whiteout Survival, and actually the game was developed by the same team. So it's much faster and a lot of best practices over there. And also when we launched Kingshot, to be honest, we didn't have that high expectation for this game. We saw the game will cannibalize Whiteout Survival. It turns out to be way better than we thought. A few reasons. One is when we launched Kingshot, we already know the Whiteout ROAS model. So when we do marketing, do performance marketing, we have a lot of benchmarks over there. So we can easily spend the money as fast as we could. So and also we know a lot of do's and don'ts. So it's much easier for us to grow through the initial phases because code start is always the hardest part for launching any product. Even you understand this market, you understand even you have a good metrics, early metrics, because I mean it could be a golden cohort, right? It could be a lot of reasons. So when you really scale that, so you actually need a lot of additional knowledge. I mean a lot of confidence, especially like when you are spending money on that. I mean if you can't be ROI positive, there will be a lot of questions here and there. So yeah, all of these are based on some fundamental knowledge that you have already established, and also technologies, and including the ad technology and also the live ops technologies, and yeah, it's I would say it's very important. But the first thing is you need to get your first product out, so which is going through all the test process I mentioned earlier. Yeah.
Moving on from product market fit, so distribution has drastically changed from the early days of Facebook, early social games, to iOS's privacy changes, to the very diversified channels that we're seeing now with Discord and Roblox and even AI native discovery platforms. You both have successfully navigated the many shifts that have happened across these distribution channels. What changes are you observing today? What strategies would you advise for founders to take advantage of? And what other suggestions do you have for some of the founding teams that we have in this audience?
Oh, you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah, it's ultimately you have to have a distribution mindset right at the beginning of product development. I think more of my efforts are going towards distribution than the product at times, and that's really a reflection of how hard it is to reach a consumer that is so distracted. We had most people in this room, I think we had the luxury over the last 10 years of watching time on device grow to arguably a level that we should all be a little bit uncomfortable with. Your average Gen Z is spending 8 hours a day on their phone, and I spot check this all the time with different Gen Z consumers, and it's true in Europe, it's true here. And the challenge with that is as developers now we're fighting and we're competing for that 8 hours, which again, arguably I would like that to be lower. And so distribution is a massive challenge because if we think there's been a content explosion over the last 10 years, I think we're at the starting point of something that explodes well beyond anything that we've seen. And finding that consumer is going to be more difficult than ever. For me, my approach leans into my product strategy. Like, where are the use cases? Where are the niches? Where are the consumers that are not being properly served today by the incumbents? And there's a lot of use cases out there. I think you probably can look at almost any category. Certainly the category I'm in, that is very much true. And we're going to serve them. And we're going to serve them well. And we're going to reach them arguably through strategies of, being on the street with them, creating the content that's applicable to them. Ultimately, we're bringing some of them in through essentially a Web3 strategy. We've established an SPV for early investors to come on board so that the community is helping us build the product early, and we're iterating with their needs in mind. And I believe these hyper-local communities are the ones that talk, the ones that share, the ones that will find themselves in a channel in Discord or Reddit, and they will share these experiences because there's finally products out there that are serving their needs. So for us, we're constraining ourselves geographically, taking a little bit of a page out of Tinder's playbook. We're not starting on a college campus, but very much geographic constraint, and then another constraint of thinking about the audience that we're serving.
Yeah, from my perspective, in general, it's just you go to where the users in. So any of the platforms or market, as long as there are qualified users, you want to go there. And now we are, in terms of performance marketing, we are in the post-IDFA age era, I would say. Like Mao said, it's hard to find the right audience. So you need to understand how the where the user are, and there's a product marketing match. And also for advertisement, you need to make sure you understand the ad technology and you make good use of that, and use the ads like Uploving, Meta, Google to find you the right audience, and then you sell the right product to them. So in general, for us, it's I would say it basically just like two things. One is you get the product down to the highest level that you could, and then just to use whatever available technologies or a tech stack, I would say, to help you to funnel the user in and make sure that users stay in your game, because like live ops or and community building, those are critically important, right? Because users more and more expensive. You don't want to waste your marketing dollar. You want to make sure like you maximize the lifetime value of the user. So yeah, all these matters.
Yeah, one thing I would just add on to this as well is that I think content is really a big part of our distribution strategy. Within the content that we're intending to enable, we believe out of that comes a richness of knowledge and insights that we can translate into AEO. And so how do we, in a world today, become on the forefront of these LLMs through discovery? How do we become in that authoritative search? And we believe it sits in the content that will be created inside our experience.
Before we get into the Q&A, I did have one more question about monetization and retention, because both of you have very deep experiences in very different monetization models, from free-to-play to monetizing lifestyle apps to subscription to free-to-play and very platform-specific models. And so, Xiang, you were talking about, yeah, users are getting more expensive to acquire, and Mark, you're talking about this fight for attention. Really, what are you seeing working when it comes to monetization and retention, and how do you balance that focus on short-term revenue versus like building a player or user community?
I can start on this one. So yeah, I mean, in general, in terms of monetization, like I just mentioned, you do want to max out the value of the user, and typically there are a few ways of doing that, right? So first of all, just to make sure like users stay in the game, retention, and then we talk about live ops. Live ops are important. Right? It's like Mark mentioned that you need to keep delivering content to make sure that user being engaged over time. And for all of game we've been operating, live ops is critical important, like the single critical important element for making the game successful. Like the longest game we have been running is already over, I think, 15 years, and still generating a lot of revenue. And the users just keep coming back. And also today, I mean, thanks to AI, so you can actually do a lot of personalization, right? So, because different users, they have different flavor, and they have different like paying abilities, right? You want to serve them the right content, and you don't want to monetize all of them at the same level. So all of these are pretty important in today's live ops strategy. I mean, in terms of the short-term capital and the long-term, and for us, it's all about ROAS model. So we want to make sure like we are very confident, like given all the risks associated with the market turbulence or everything, that every dollar we spend, we can make it ROI positive in foreseeable future. I understand some publishers have been doing like 3 years ROI model. I think it's a little bit too aggressive. We would never try to go that long, but as long as you're confident with your product and you're pretty like confident about the marketing trend, then you should be able to extend your ROI cycle, which will help you to generate a long-term revenue cash flow.
Yeah, I would say two real quick things. One, my thesis or hypothesis is that the incumbents have business models that are now 10 to 15 years old. They served the consumer well at that point in time. The consumer is so radically different today. And so I think within that, there's an opportunity to do things differently. And when you think about your product, you can't think about your product absent your business model. They're arguably one and the same. And so thinking about that consumer journey, how you support them, and the business mechanics that ultimately accelerate their experience is critical. The second part I would say is it's true on any product I've worked on. 80% of those that are going to convert happens in the first 7 days. And so I think that's going to be true going forward as well. And so in that first 7 days, you cannot not think about engagement. You can't think of, ignore retention. You can't not think about what is the hook, what's going to drive their next session. Because you need to win those 7 days in order to capture anyone that's going to monetize. And so I don't decouple the two. I think they're intrinsically the same.
Yeah, thank you for adding those last two things. I think we have time for maybe one question if we want to do this here. I think there's somebody walking down the aisle with a mic if you do want to ask. But otherwise, please feel free to pull aside our speakers after the session. All right, we got a pretty shy audience today, so why don't we go ahead and wrap things up? Thank you both so much for the time, and yes, please do have conversations with these both after the session.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Assume. Oh, you're getting wired right now.